Favourite part of butchery? Probably been feeding people, right? Like actually putting an offering in front of people and watching them enjoy that, right? So bringing families together and friends together and seeing that as part of butchery has been something that I've really enjoyed.
This is the Australian Butchers Guild podcast, brought to you by Meat and Livestock Australia, the podcast for passionate butchers.
G'day and welcome to the Australian Butchers Guild podcast. I'm your host, Doug Piper. Today we're catching up with Rafael Ramirez. He's a butcher from Western Australia. He is one of the best butchers I've actually come across, to be quite honest. What he doesn't know about meat isn't worthwhile knowing. We're going to actually catch up with part 2 from the last episode. You're right about going full circle. I've said this before. Caveman started, they were wearing leather. They had long hair and beards and tattoos, I suppose, or they were doing artwork on the walls anyway. And look at today's modern butcher, the craftsman. He's wearing leather, he's got tattoos, beard, long, well, maybe not long hair, but it'll be in a bun. And they're utilising the whole carcass. So we've gone from way back then to today. We haven't gone very far, but I think butchers today are just so much better at what they do.
They're in a pretty good space. I think we went through a transition, I don't know, back in WA, probably, I reckon it's 20 years ago, where we had something like 1,250 local independent butchers, and then over this phase of, for whatever reason, and people's consumer habits were changing, we dropped down to today less than 300, right? So the guys that are left, I generally have 100% respect for, because they are generally offering something unique in regards to whether it's value adding, whether it's the farm to fork story, or just getting their pitch right. Seeing a few butcher shops turning over 80 and 100 grand a week is not unheard of these days, right? Where if you went back a few years ago, and I know meat's more expensive, but they are just getting better and better at what they do. So that's pretty exciting for independent butchers.
You know, it's so easy for butchers to market themselves today. If you're going to spend a bit of money, employ a social media manager, someone to look after your socials for you, because they are the ones that know how to drive your business. They're very easy to work with. We're starting to use a lady now to do all our socials and that. It's just a way of getting your business recognised, rather than, you're not going to go put an ad in the paper. It's only going to reach the people that read the paper, and most of those people are probably 200 or 300 kilometres away. Whereas with the way social media works, it targets people that like the stuff that you're trying to sell. And hopefully you'll be able to, I think there's ways that they can do it demographically as well as in your area,
Yeah, absolutely, Doug. I think that space is, these days, if you think about the younger generations, right, these phones are stuck to their hips, and, our generation sort of sees a bit of it. We're not love doing it, but everyone's got a phone stuck to their heads at the end of the days and reading stuff. So it's an information platform, right? And we just need to keep relevant. The other one too is I done a little bit of work with sort of retailers and that. It's about owning your space. And I think that whether you want to call it a database or actually having a regular or building a database of clients that you can communicate with on a regular basis. So it's a numbers game. If you've got 1,000 people on your database and you communicate with them, and I'm not saying bombarding them with specials and things like that, but I think it's actually telling a story, whether it's produce. It's not always about just trying to sell things. It's about providing a platform that you can just give generic information, how to cook something. Here's produce from a certain region. They're, I suppose, hungry for content, or hungry to understand, and feed them some information, and then occasionally provide them with a promotion, right? And that platform, if you can grow that, and the more of that you own, the easier it is to sort of do that, whether that's Facebook or however you're doing it. But I think that's a really important piece that I think butchers forget, and they get reliant on just people walking past a cabinet when they use this digital platform to bring people in the shops.
Do you think email or text messages are better?
I think you sort of got to establish that as part of a sign-up, give people an option. Emails, I don't know, I've looked at my email, sometimes I open it, there's 100 there, right? And you sort of start to filter out pretty quickly what you want and what you don't. But I've found that in this scenario with butchers, as long as you're providing good content and stuff like that, emails do work. I work with a retailer that once a fortnight, they send out an email, one's with some info on it. Next is with a promotional activity that they're doing. And we know that there's a spike of customers that will come through the door. Just they have 7,000 people on the database, right? But out of that, if you pick up 5% of customers, there's 70 or whatever it is, people coming through the door based on some type of further communication outside of advertising. So that is done through an email. Text messaging, I suppose is if I'm just getting a text message from someone that I haven't asked for it from, I get a bit like antsy with. If I've signed up to my local butcher or whatever it is to get, and I've opted in to get information, generally I'll open it because I've opted in because it's of interest to me.
Yeah, I think getting permission is the biggest thing. So obviously, definitely working that out very early in the piece before you start sending out a million texts. Now, while you were talking, I had a thought. What if you just if you had your customer database there and you're trying to encourage them to come and buy something from your shop, just send them a photo of something that you've created in your window with a very short bit of copy there, like, have you tried this? Have you got something ready for dinner? Puts you in the front of their mind then. Why is he sending me this? Oh, it's dinner time. Or it prompts me to want to go and buy something for dinner. Just something simple like that. I wonder if that would work.
I think the component to it is consistency, right? If you're just doing it ad hoc, then people, if it's just coming through randomly. But if I just sort of know that every fortnight I'm getting my email from my butcher saying, hey, here's what I'm doing, I think as long as it's not a hard sell and we've got some content in there, and it could be simple, stupid little things. I've sort of done it with past is how to build a database. Well, you might actually put something, on social media around how do you sharpen a knife, right? Download this free ebook on how to sharpen knives, right? Because everyone goes, oh, I would like to know how to do that. And then I get something for free for actually giving my details over. And then that opens up the door. So I was interested in something. I've got something that resonates with me. And then I'm prepared to then build, I suppose, loyalty around that as opposed to just getting, so you got to feed people information, right? Don't just try the hard sell. It's something that's exciting, whether it's sharpen a knife, whether it's the apprentice has just created this wonderful meal opportunity. Look what he's done. But guess what? 4 of these will feed the family at, I don't know, XYZ dollars. If you come in today, or let us know if you're interested. We only got 20 pieces. Let us know if you're interested, right?
Yeah.
What's the call to action? How do we get people to come into the shop is the big one, right? So it's it's an interesting space.
There's a couple of butchers in Melbourne that do it extremely well, and that's Boucher's and Meatsmith. They send an EDM out. I think it might be every fortnight. I don't think it's a weekly, but I seem to get one at least every fortnight from Meatsmith and from Boucher's. And the way they construct it, I saw today's one, it was beautiful. What they had in there was just next level. Even sort of showed you in a way, like this is for their customers, but it's just had a deconstructed lamb cutlet there that they were putting out that's a special one. And, it's one of those things that I thought, why aren't butchers doing something like that? And they're actually doing it, but they had that extra bit to it. They were using caul fat, they were using cabbage, and they had a sausage around the cutlet eye of the meat. It was just so well done, and the way that it's all put together, very professional, like extremely professional. And they don't put price on it. It's just come on in and try it. That's it. And that gets the juices flowing for me. Like I'm thinking, God, I wish I was down in Fitzroy. I'd be straight into that shop and I'd be getting a couple of them. Such a great idea, and the way that they execute it is just on point.
And I think that there's a raw component to it. And then I think we should be thinking about what that finished meal looks like too, right? So it's, here's the raw, this is what it's done. If you put it with mash and veggies or something like that, got a great meal and the food styling. So if you think about it, we're inspired by visuals. And then obviously when we see something visually, really excited about taste. So those butchers have got it. They're onto it, right? They're engaging with their customers. They're giving the story across that sometimes you can't just give across when you're serving a customer, right? That information's got to come from a digital platform, and that digital platform will get people into the shop. And then when you've got them into the shop, it's all about the craftsmanship and, your offering that you do. So, that's an exciting space. So I think it's, I've got a bit of a saying, you need to keep investing in yourself or within the business around getting the business to that next level. So butchers sometimes get a bit nervous of that, but they need to keep investing in themselves to be relevant.
No, that's you spot on there, mate. I always remember one of the tours we went on to into Victoria, Peter Robinson. He now owns a butcher store, I think it is. He's got about a dozen shops down there. At the time, he had a shop called Elgin Robinson, and I was talking to him there, and he goes, I spend, I don't know what it was, $100,000 a year on marketing. I said, wow, how can you afford to do that? And he goes, how can I afford not to?
as long as you can measure the return on investment, right? If you're just spending money for spending money, that's no, but you've got to be able to measure it and make changes. So there's digital platforms. Sometimes you do a post and you go, geez, I had so much interaction with that. And sometimes you get nothing. But you need to be doing more of those ones that get interactions and less of the ones that are doing nothing, right? The way you learn is by when it costs you money and you get a return on investment, it's not an issue because that's not what you're thinking about. It's when it's costing you money and you're not getting an outcome, then you get a bit defensive around it.
Mate, on another level, veal. We don't see a lot of it around in too many butcher shops these days. Has it got much presence over there in WA?
Yeah, look, it is a niche market. We've sort of we have some really good European butchers over here that have always chased veal or capretto. That's where you sort of ended up, and sort of mentioned a few of those guys before in regards to those types of styles. But something that's probably a bit unique in WA is, and I'm probably a bit biased, but I spent several years working with Mondo Butchers, but they Vince Gareffa, the owner, someone who's became a mentor to me, and just I adored just working there, and two is learning how he was such a great butcher, but two was such a great marketer of the industry and all those supporting the industry. But, they had a program, well, they still have a program. I think it's 35 years in the making now, White Rocks veal. So that was seen to be the real first sort of European type veal or milk-fed veal in the marketplace. And still today, they service butchers around the country where they'll send sides of beef or sides of veal over or broken down for them or certain cuts. So they'll service a few butcher shops in regards to that. They only have limited supply. It's not a large processing scale at any means, but they'll get, I don't know exactly what the numbers are, Doug, but they've got a good solid program that services, maybe half a dozen or so retail butchers around the country, or those high-end retailers, because it's not a cheap product, and two into food service. So they've had world awards on a global scale around that produce. I can remember working on it. I used to go down to one of the processings where they would process it and put it into a box and send it into countries like Japan and things like that and exporting. And it was almost like chicken, right? It was that light that it was that true milk-fed veal where, I've sort of seen veal product, starting to get some really rich red colour, and there's not that there's anything wrong with it, but if you're a traditionalist around veal, it's generally that lighter, pinker, milkier colour. So Mondo's had that program running for 35 years, and that's White Rocks veal. If butchers were keen to sort of know a bit more about it, Google it. I know they do supply some of the high-end retail butchers around the country. But two, it's probably a little bit unique to WA in regards to that sort of profile around veal.
Yeah. It's always been something that I've been watching out for, veal. And you're right, in the European butcheries, yes, they do have a bit of veal, but it's more about supply and getting the right product. And whereas, I think veal's classified up to 180 kilos. I think it's a little bit bigger these days, but it's that deeper, richer colour. Obviously, the texture's going to be a little bit different. Still eats okay, but a lot of butchers still say, no, it's not actually veal, but unfortunately it is classified as veal.
Under the Ausmeat terminology, it will sit under, I think it might be 150, 150, 160 or something along those lines. I could be wrong, but I think these guys were sort of, back in the day when they were doing them, they were around that, 110, 120 kilos. So lighter, not quite the bobby veal, not that light, but had enough structure in them that when you were doing a cutlet or something like that, they were seen to be a good sizing for portioning and things like that.
So what's been your favourite part of butchery?
Favourite part of butchery? If I get back into it, I think it's probably been feeding people, right? Like actually putting an offering in front of people and watching them enjoy that, right? So bringing families together and friends together and all that sort of stuff. So seeing that as part of butchery has been something that I've really enjoyed. I can remember a story going years and years ago where I had my own butcher shop, and Beros, her name was, I can still remember this to the day, and I put something special away for her, some standing ribs, and for her son's engagement, I think it was, and then she comes in the Monday after thinking, oh, she's going to give me a big cuddle because it was the best ever, and she came and said to me that was the worst bit of meat ever. So I learned really quickly that I can do the best of what I can do, but occasionally some things go wrong, and I hate that failure. So I do love getting it right. Occasionally when we or industry get it wrong, that sort of hurts a little bit. But I think the other part of it is just sharing some of my knowledge. Doug, in regards to working with butchers and chefs and, just the general public around, the excitement and alternative cuts and all that sort of stuff has been really exciting for me to be able to be so that, there's some of my favourite things around butchery. And two is, I don't know, like I think when we first started, Doug, getting butchers to talk to each other or visiting stores, and that was probably seen as, they're my competitor. I love seeing how butchers are a bit more united today in regard, that independent butcher actually welcomes people into their stores and takes that. So seeing that progress over time has been really a nice platform, and I know you've been part of that journey for a long time. So to Meat and Livestock Australia, I know AMIC guys and things like that do a really good job of bringing butchers together, and just recently seen, the World Butchers Competition and that sort of stuff. That just blows my mind in regards to, seeing how proud our young guys coming through and giving them some direction around highlighting our craft is something pretty special.
Yeah, it's just amazing the way that the butchers are with each other. There's been some great relationships built out of over the years, and there's a couple of butchers up north here, and there's a real bromance going on. It's all on socials, but it's Century 21 Meats in, I think he's Thornton or somewhere up there around the Newcastle way, and there's Snow and Sons. These guys got a real bromance happening. I think one of them's even got a tattoo of the other guy's butcher shop on him. It's just incredible. But it's a whole get together. I don't know whether it started out online or whatever it is, but they're just in love with each other. It's a really cool sort of thing. And I'm sure there's other butchers out there, maybe not as passionate as what those guys are, but they get along really well and keep in touch with people, whether they've been to their shops, go and have a meal with them or whatever, and just find out little things about their business and then take them back to their own business. I think we're in a really good spot.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, I'm excited for the next journey or the next 20 years, looks like. I mean, I was watching something on AI last night and thinking, how does that affect us as an industry? I still think it's an artisan thing. I think it's going to be pretty hard to get AI to replicate a butcher today, tomorrow, and in the future. Pretty safe with jobs in regards to that. Yes, they'll find some efficiencies and stuff, but it's a unique skill set, and we're should be really proud of.
Yeah, they'll need us around for a little bit longer now.
Yeah, exactly, mate. People always want to eat, Doug.
True. So what's your favourite hobby, mate? What do you like to get up to?
Look, these days, as I've got a bit older, I used to kick a soccer ball around and stuff like that from a sports point of view. And now I'm getting a bit old, so I go and hit a little round ball around the park. So a bit of golf every now and then. From that component, anything sport-wise, I sort of hobby-wise. But one of the other things, I suppose, just being a meathead, just entertaining at home, right? Just actually doing some cooking and bringing, good friends and bottle of wine and putting a favourite cut of meat on and, just watching people enjoy themselves. I love doing the travelling stuff, Doug. I've sort of been fortunate enough to do some of that work and play and just sort of understanding different cultures. And then I sort of challenge myself, probably try to learn something new every week, right? And that's for whatever reason it is, whether it's personal or from a professional point of view, is just investing back into myself to sort of self-motivate or whatever it is, Doug. But there's sort of things that get me up in the morning every day and try to keep me focused.
Mate, I've met a lot of your mates over the years. You're a great group of people, really, really tight-knit bunch, and, see the way that you create that bloody paella that you do, mate. You are Spanish. So,
Yeah.
So what's your favourite cut of beef and lamb?
Pretty hard for me to just go to one, but I've got to give you a couple of each, right? But I don't know, when it comes to lamb, I've become partial to like a slow cooked lamb shoulder, like a banjo, right? I love centerpieces. I'll put that banjo in and cook him 4, 6, 8 hours, depending on what I want to get it to, and then just chucking a fork in the middle with some, the wife to put some, some veggies and stuff like that on, because that's not my forte, right?
Yeah,
I'm a meathead, right?
Same.
So that centerpiece shoulders, like, I just love chucking it in the middle and sticking a fork in it, right? And then people just pull it to pieces. So the other one is, I love things like lamb ribs. Like, once upon a time we used to throw them away. I've sort of played around enough with them these days to get them trimmed to a certain component where the fat doesn't swell and becomes a bit too overpowering. And then just twice cooking those, they are, like, I love those as a good finger food component, and they're really cost effective. And then if I'm doing a barbie for lamb, I like the butterfly lamb leg. I've got mates. While you say I've got some great mates, I've got some pain in the asses that want, well done and rare and all that sort of stuff. So that really rustic feel to a butterfly lamb leg covers all of those points off. So that gives me that lamb covered off. When it comes to beef's just an interesting beast, isn't it, right? You got, it's a bigger beast. It gives us so much more flexibility in regards to being exciting. But oyster blade, a flat iron, Doug, I like to still throw a bit of butchery skill set on. Whether oyster blade, it's so versatile. Whether I want to just put in a curry and not do much to it, or if I want to turn it into a flat iron and stick it on the grill. I still get fascinated when we do don't tell them what cut of meat is and get them to eat it, and they just get blown away by how tender an oyster blade is, right, in regards to that. So I don't like to tell them what cut it is, and they just go, wow, that's amazing. And we know that, looking at meat science and all that sort of stuff, it's actually more tender than a cube roll on the same animal, right? So that's pretty cool to do that. And when we all have a big fat, tomahawk, right, I work with a client that does a bit of dry aging, so I like to sort of run through that process a bit. And while it's not for everybody, I like to sort of go through that process. And tomahawks is something that gives you that bit of a wow factor, and I like that, what we can do with meat these days.
I agree with all those cuts from your shoulder to your flat iron to your Tommy. I like a tomahawk, but I would much rather a flat iron, to be quite honest.
Pretty hard to beat a flat iron. And it's funny, I think we're sort of going through this phase. Doug, I don't know, we went back 20 years ago and we said, if we looked at rumps, right, and we went, hey, we're starting to break down rumps and pulling rump caps off and all that stuff, and everyone went, I'm not doing that, that's too hard, and all those bits and pieces. And we look 20 years down the track and everyone's pulling rump caps off, right, because they worked out rump actually eats pretty good, right? So, and that sort of style, and I think we're starting to see that transition through other cuts of meat. So oyster blade is, while it takes a little bit of trimming and butchery to get to a flat iron, when you actually get back to the sellable meat, it's cheaper than a cube roll and fillet, and eats just as good, right? So I think we've just got to keep that in the back of mind, is eating quality first, right? Names second, and just provide that.
The funny thing is, we've got a local Coles down here, and obviously being a butcher, you can't walk past the meat department without seeing what they've got in there. And I often sit there and I'll stand there and I'll watch people buy meat and look what they're looking at, how they're trying to choose what they want. And Coles sell a flat iron steak in their range, and they've got a little knob of butter in there. I think it's a herb and chili or something like that. And one thing I have noticed, it's always the first steak that goes, or it's always got only one or none left on the shelf compared to all the other steaks there. They're getting $35 a kilo for it. It's still reasonably priced, but it just shows you how popular that steak is. And I don't know how people have come across it, whether they've eaten it in a restaurant or they've seen it on a cooking show. That's our best friend, it's cooking shows as well. But it's amazing that I always look for it, and there's very rarely anything more than one left, which is, I think, incredible.
You're right. I think, we don't buy meat to put in the pool room on the shelf, right, to look at. We actually eat it. So it's, when you get the eating quality right of a product and it's trimmed well, it just speaks for itself. It also, from a butchery point of view, when we think about butterfly things, we have something like in lamb, which is a butterfly lamb leg, but with oyster blades, I actually fillet them and have them as 2 fillets. But what I love about it is you cook them and then they become this shared plate style of food. So I like that they're not just individual steaks, if you like. They're actually, why you cook them as, and then you carve them and let people take them off as they need. It's become a really good way of eating steaks these days, and not just necessarily saying, hey, here's just your portion, right? It's actually having that as a shared plate is becoming really popular.
Yeah. Mate, last subject. MSA lamb is starting to, it's back on the market again, I suppose. We had it a while back and it sort of, I wouldn't say fell away, but it just sort of was pushed to the side a little bit. And now the technology's got better, and there's a lot happening in that area, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure, Dougie. I suppose when it comes to MSA, if we get back to eating quality, right, it's actually just about segregating animals and getting them into the right eating quality band. So it's we do have technology today, and where we didn't have that in the previous times. And 2 is MSA is a grading tool. It's not really a marketing tool. So what we're seeing today is industry adopting new technologies, and it's being able to measure things like intramuscular fat, where we've never been able to do that, where beef we would quarter, and you'll be able to measure that quite easily. We have now technology that's been able to do that. We're then starting to couple that things with like yield and fat scores and conditioning of the lamb, and then having a model that predicts eating quality. So not just fixating marbling, but fixating on, the whole eating quality attributes, just like what we've done with beef, Doug, if you think about it. So that next transition is, I was up doing a workshop in Singapore just recently. We had some product that had been, I suppose, a higher eating quality product that had been pulled apart. It was an IMF of 6%. It had a good high-end lamb product out of one of the suppliers up there. And I suppose the food service and retail guys were going, oh, there's a bit of marbling in this. We actually, in our way of cooking or how to extract some further value, they thought that as being able to buy a premium product out of lamb, where once upon a time we've just kept lamb as a category. So I think the sheep meat industry is in a really exciting phase. I think it's probably the most exciting protein on the planet at the moment in regards to extracting further value and providing a higher level of eating quality or more consistency. And I think we're going to see that progress as industry picks up the technology component and adjusts processing to do that. Will be similar like beef, Doug, where if you wanted whether you want a grass-fed or grain-fed, you want a marble score, you want a wagyu or whatever, an excuse for people to buy a higher quality or a higher level of eating quality. I think that's a good thing for industry in regards to the end consumer, whether it's a producer and whether it's a butcher, right? So I think consistency has to be a really important thing for us, and anything that's going to give us those measurements to do that has got to be a good thing for industry.
Definitely.
So not getting fixated on MSA, and I don't think we should be selling lamb just as MSA. We should be selling that through brand support or understanding what the brand is. If you think about, if you think about your shoes that you wear, Dougie, you've probably got a pair of R.M. Williams on, right, and they're nice and comfortable. I might want to wear a pair of Blundstones where we're familiar with branding, and then just let the branding pick the eating quality outcomes they need to do, and then you as a business, you'll work out what product you want to sell.
Yeah. Do you think breeds are going to play a big part of that as well to dictate the type of lambs that we're going to be selling?
It's a bit of a tricky one in regards to that breeds isn't showing such a big variable in regards to the modelling like we do with beef at this stage. I will say that genetics or certain breeds will give us better outcomes over time in regards to marbling and things like that. So I think what's going to become really exciting as we have feedback being provided to producers. So the modelling gives us ultimately, like what we do in beef, is we're able to get feedback in regards to all the attributes of lambs, and that helps us make on-farm decisions. So whether it's breed focus, I'm not sure whether it's going to be just that, but genetics is going to show us where we want to get to in regards to eating quality.
Awesome. Sounds good. Looking forward to it, actually. Looking forward to it. Any sort of timeline on that when it's going to sort of really start seeing graded meat out there or graded lamb out there? Or?
Yeah, look, there are processes today segregating on those attributes. The full modelling of the MSA eating quality outcomes that are still in play or getting developed. I would say there is product being segregated on eating quality now. The modelling may come within the next 12, 24 months, starting to see more of that product flowing through. And the reason is to capture all that data. Processing needs to adopt. It's at a much quicker pace than beef, right? So we need to be able to collect data quickly and efficiently and be able to then separate those lambs or sheep carcasses down lines that are going to give us, I suppose, some consistency in regards to that. So in a processing, there's a significant amount of investing and learnings in regards to getting that right. But an exciting phase, Doug. I can't wait. Look, and I'll throw the butcher's hat on. Like, I know that every now and then, I've gone and bought a lamb chop, whatever, and gone, that was awesome. And every now and then I've gone and bought the same lamb chop and gone, oh, that's a bit chewy. And I always go back to, you get judged by the worst one in the box, not the best one. The last time you get a failure rate is an excuse for someone not to eat it again. So as industry gets its head around about consistency and how we can provide a fail-proof product, I think that's going to only good for the sheep meat industry.
No, it sounds exciting, mate. Looking forward to it. Well, mate, look, been really good to catch up with you today. I really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot, mate, and we'll catch up with you on the roundabout somewhere, I imagine.
Yeah, sounds good, Dougie. Appreciate the opportunity to have a chat, and hello to all my butcher mates out there.
I'm sure they send their best, mate. Good on you, Rafa.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, buddy.
This podcast is provided for information purposes only. The MLA Group strongly recommends that listeners exercise discretion and obtain professional advice before relying on any information in this podcast.